I'd next like to discuss the all-seeing eye as a symbol. I'd like to read a series of 4 quotes by Masons that I have found in my research without identifying the author, but all of these discuss the all-seeing eye. So let's read these quotes one after the other to show you how important the all-seeing eye is. The eye was also the symbol of Osiris. By the way, Osiris, well, in fact, we'll read the next quote. Osiris, the sun and principle of good. Osiris was the chief god of the Egyptians. Osiris was the sun. And the last quote was, an unopened eye in honor of the great eye of the universe, the sun. So the eye is a symbol of the sun god, and the sun god is Lucifer. And here we see an all-seeing eye on the back of our dollar bill above the pyramid. And all of this was known to the Masons who designed the Great Seal of the United States in 1782. Earlier in this lecture, I quoted the Masonic teaching from Albert Pike that taught us this: what is superior is as that which is inferior, and what is below is as that which is above. The Masons want us to believe that the eye is a symbol of a good God. We think that means the God of the Bible. But the Mason knows that to understand what they say, you must reverse the meaning of their words. That means that the eye is a symbol of an evil God. Their God is just the opposite of what the public thinks. I would like to remind you of this drawing that Rex Hutchins put in his book entitled A Bridge to Light. We examine it when you flip it over, and here we see the demon god that the Masons worship. So the observer who is not a Mason can now understand much of their writings if the meanings of their words is reversed. For instance, if you reverse the following quote, it really starts to make sense. This quote appeared in the New Age magazine published by the Masons for September 1950, just 5 years after World War II. This quote reads as follows: God's plan, and once again, if you reverse it, he's talking about the plan of Lucifer, is dedicated to the unification of all races, religions, and creeds. This plan, dedicated to the new order of things, is to make all things new. A new nation, a new race, a new civilization, and a new religion. A non-sectarian religion that has already been called the religion of the great light. And you might remember, as we pointed out before, Lucifer was the light bearer. Let's continue with the quote. Looking back into history, we can easily see that the guiding hand of providence, and here we mean Lucifer, has chosen the Nordic people to bring in and unfold the new order of the world. Records clearly show that 95% of the colonists were Nordics, Anglo-Saxons. Providence, reversed once again, means Lucifer has chosen the Nordic race to unfold the new age of the world, a novus ordo seclorum. This is God's, and once again reverse it, meaning Lucifer's great plan in America for the dawn of the new age of the world. Remember that this article was written just 5 years after World War II. Those familiar with what Adolf Hitler talked about will notice that the two thoughts were identical. So here we found some evidence that the Masons want the same thing that Adolf Hitler wanted. In a few moments, I'm going to present you the information that Adolf Hitler was a Luciferian. He worshipped Lucifer, also known as Satan or the devil. Also remember what the Satan-worshipping Hitler said. He wanted to create a new world order that was intended to destroy all religions, just like George Bush. They both wanted the same thing. According to the Masons and Adolf Hitler, the Nordic Aryan race would lead the world into a new world order. Remember that this article was written just 5 years after the conspiracy financed the madman Hitler and caused World War II. It seems as if some of the Masons know the truth. Next, I would like to discuss the serpent as a symbol used by the Masons in America. This is once again the book written by Jim Shaw, a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Mason, entitled The Deadly Deception. Mr. Shaw is perhaps the first 33rd degree Mason to break with the order, and he has written this book to expose part of what he learned as a Mason. He talks about his initiation into the 33rd degree Masonic temple, into the 33rd degree inside the Masonic temple in Washington, D.C. He writes this: the interior walls are decorated with serpents. There are all kinds, some very long and large. Many of the Scottish Rite degrees include representations of serpents, and I recognize them amongst those decorating the walls. Notice that Mr. Shaw says that he saw serpents throughout the Masonic Lodge. He did not see the cross of the Christians or the Star of David of the Jews. He saw serpents. And this is a slide of the 33rd degree temple in Washington, D.C., where Mr. Shaw was initiated. I took that slide myself, and unfortunately I had to put two slides together because I couldn't get close enough, and so it's a little bit different. But that's the building right there that's in just north of the White House in Washington, D.C., called the 33rd degree Masonic Temple in Washington. Notice the wall behind the outside columns in front of the building. This is a close-up of that symbol in the center. You can't see it very clearly, but it appears to be a painting of the Egyptian double-winged symbol we studied earlier in this lecture, but I cannot tell because it's simply too far away. This is a close-up of the area to the right side of the symbol, and I'm sorry the slide was taken sideways. We just looked at. But if you'll notice there very carefully, there are clearly snakes on the wall, each maybe 6 feet high. Now there's the point, and there's the slide showing you that there's a snake right there behind the red arrow, and on the outside wall of the building. I darkened or lightened my picture by putting it on my slide, my Xerox machine. Now let's go to the inside of the building. This is a slide of the interior of the 33rd degree Masonic Temple. This came from a Masonic magazine. Notice the snakes coiled on the wall behind the men in the chairs on the right and the left, upper. The head of each snake is in the middle near the top. I'm sure probably out of the picture on your on this TV. But this is a different view of the same room, and I have put red arrows near the 2 snakes on the wall behind the chairs. This is a close-up of one of the snakes behind the men in the chairs, and here you can just barely see the snake's head in the center with its mouth to the left. It's open, and then the rest of the snake is coiled around behind the men in the chairs. This is another picture of one of the many coiled snakes inside the Masonic Temple. This picture appears to be a smaller version of the one big picture shown behind the men in the chairs. You might ask why the Masons use the serpent as a symbol all over their temple. One Mason wrote this on page 63 of his book entitled Freemasonry and the Ancient Gods. He said, "The serpent in our lodges is emphatically not there as an enemy of man. The traditional version of the serpent in the Garden of Eden is that he is a tempter of mankind. But as I've already discussed, the Masons are using the serpent as a symbol of a good God. Not only does the temple utilize the serpent as a symbol of the concealed God of the Masonic Lodge, they also utilize the sun as well. As I've said before, sun worship is not new. Now let's connect sun worship to the Masonic organization. Albert Mackey wrote this: sun worship was the oldest and by far the most prevalent of all the ancient religions. Hardly any of the symbols of Masonry are more important in their signification or more extensive in their application than the sun as the source of material light. It minds the Mason of that intellectual light of which he is in constant search. Masons understand that the sun is a symbol of something higher. The sun became an object of worship as a symbol of something else. One secret society that worshipped the sun was the Thule Society in Germany. The Thule Society. Adolf Hitler was a member of this group after joining it early in his life. I chose this picture of Adolf Hitler for a reason. Notice that the man appears to be a man possessed. I believe he was, and he was also an architect of evil, because Adolf Hitler was a worshiper of Lucifer. Hitler formed his Nazi party from members of the Thule Society. The committee and the 40 original members of the Nazi party were all drawn from the most powerful occult society in Germany called the Thule Society. And this is a slide of the symbol of the Thule Society. Notice that they use 2 major symbols. One was a spear or a dagger, and the other was a swastika. The spear appears to be a drawing of another spear called this one, the Spear of Destiny. This is an actual photograph of this spear. The spear is shown here in 3, well actually it's shown together, but there's 3 parts to it. The 2 spear points have been, which were once joined together, have broken into 2, and they made the sleeve shown on the left to keep the two parts together. Tradition has it that this is the spear that Longinus, the Roman soldier, used when he pierced the side of Jesus at the crucifixion. If you look carefully, you will see a long spike held in place by a wire wrapped around it on the spear on the left. It's also on the right, but the sleeve somewhat conceals it. But the legend is that this was the nail that was used to nail Jesus to the cross. In 1909, Adolf Hitler visited the museum in which the spear is kept in Vienna, Austria. He claims to have had a religious experience when he heard the museum guide explain the tradition of the spear. This is what Hitler wrote. "And then I heard the words which were to change my whole life. There is a legend associated with this spear that whoever claims it and solves its secrets holds the destiny of the world in his own hands, for good or for evil." The guide went on to point out that it is claimed that these leaders of the past once possessed the spear: Charlemagne, Constantine the Great, Attila the Hun, and Julius Caesar. And another legend holds that Brutus used this spear to kill Caesar. Hitler claims that he realized at that moment that he was destined to possess the spear so that he could rule the world. It is known that the first country Hitler invaded in 1939 to start World War II was Austria, where the spear is kept, and he did indeed take possession of the spear. He kept it in Germany during the war, and it was found and returned to Vienna after the war was over. The Bible makes a connection between control of the world and the devil. This is what it says in Matthew chapter 4, verses 8 through 11. "The devil taketh him," meaning Jesus, "up into an exceeding high mountain, and showeth him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them, and saith unto him, All things will I give thee, if thou wilt fall down and worship me." So the devil claims to have possession of all the kingdoms of the world, and that he will deliver those kingdoms to those who will bow down and worship him. Hitler determined that he had to possess the spear so that he could rule all of the kingdoms of the world. Hitler had stood before the spear and made an irreversible vow to worship evil. It is also interesting that Hitler controlled the spear until April the 30th, 1945, when he committed suicide. American soldiers found the spear in the basement of the Nuremberg Castle and then kept it until it could be returned to Austria. It is while America held the spear that it dropped the atomic bombs on Japan, at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, on innocent Christians. And I'm sure there are people claiming that's only a coincidence. It is known that Adolf Hitler had read the works of Friedrich Nietzsche, who had written a book entitled The Genealogy of Morals. And in this book, Mr. Nietzsche said this. The writer of the review of the book said, "This book sought to make a reevaluation of all of man's values in the proof that so-called evil was good, and what it was habitually believed to be good was evil." Nietzsche also had written this in another book: "I pronounce my judgment, I condemn Christianity. I raise against the Christian Church the most terrible of all accusations that any accuser uttered. It is to me the highest conceivable corruption." Another of the teachers of Adolf Hitler was this man, Dietrich Eckart. Mr. Eckart was a dedicated Satanist and a supreme adept of the arts and rituals of black magic, and the central figure in a powerful and widespread circle of occultists, meaning the Thule Society. There's that quote there, that he was a dedicated Satanist. Eckart died in 1923, and just before he died, he was quoted as saying, "Follow Hitler. He will dance, but it is I who have called the tune. I have initiated him into the secret doctrine, opened his centers in vision, and given him the means to communicate with all powers." Mr. Eckart continued, "Do not mourn for me. I have influenced history more than any other German." So we can see who and what had influenced Adolf Hitler to start his goal of world conquest. The teachings